I was honestly shocked at how well put together this film was. Hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alex, and today is film versus book, and we're going to be talking about Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. 100% probably did not say that right, but let's soldier on, shall we? So if you're new here, today is film versus book, and what I'm going to be doing is talking about a book to film adaptation. So I'm going to talk about the book for a little bit, Never Let Me Go, and then I'm going to talk about the film, Never Let Me Go, and then I'm going to compare and contrast the two. Now, typically on my channel, I do spoiler free so that you can watch the video and still choose to read the book or whatever and not have any surprises ruined. But today, film versus book, there's spoilers. I'm going to get into the plot of the book and the film. So if you want to read the book still and you haven't, if you want to watch the film still and you haven't, now is your chance to log off, skip this video, and come back to it later or whatever. This is your warning. We are going to do spoilers in today's video. So make sure you hit all the buttons down below so you know when I'm posting. I post every week, and all we do on this channel is talk about books. So if you like listening to people talk about books, here I am every week doing just that for you. Without any more further ado, let's get into it. So let's start with the book, Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. When I first read this book, I had issues with it because I felt like I was expecting a different type of book than what was presented. But if you look at the book the way that it's meant to be interpreted, I think that this book really delivers on a different level. So we open the book with Kathy as she's explaining that she has been a carer for many years, taking care of people that are donating their vital organs. And at this time, she's sort of struggling with being a carer, and she says that she's going to look back at her time as a child at Hailsham. And this is when we go back to her childhood and start learning about the boarding school that she was raised in. And by all appearances, Hailsham is a normal boarding school. They have regular classes and separate boy-girl dormitories. They have a variety of ages from 5 up until 18. Everything seems very normal. And then as we start getting further into the story, we learn from one of the guardians of this school that these children are not normal children, and that their entire life's purpose is to grow up and eventually donate all of their vital organs. But before we really get into all that, Kathy highlights two friendships that carry on throughout the entire book, and that is her friendship to Ruth and Tommy. Tommy is a very complicated character that has a lot of anger issues, but he has a very sensitive soul. He's very artistic, and she creates a very close friendship with Tommy that eventually turns into a type of crush. Well, Ruth is actually kind of awful. She's kind of that friend that wants to be better than everybody else. And as we get into the book, we kind of figure out that this is just sort of a personality trait with Ruth, and she is this way through the entirety of the book. And we do spend a lot of time with Ruth, unfortunately. As Kathy is telling us this story, we're going back and forth between like her memories from Hailsham and what's happening to her in real time. And in real time right now, she's meeting up again with Ruth as Ruth is going through her second donation. Her first donation did not go well, and she's going through her second. At this point, we don't really know why Kathy's a carer and why Ruth is already donating when they're kind of the same age. But Ruth and Kathy start reminiscing on a lot of their memories at Hailsham. And one of the biggest memories that Kathy has is something called the sales and the art exchange, or the art gallery. And there's kind of this theme with the art gallery throughout the entire piece. And at the time, Tommy has never been able to get any of his art in the art gallery when they're in school, but Kathy does. And this sort of stems into an issue with Tommy about his art and this and that and the other. And Tommy gets it into his head that the reason the gallery exists is because the guardians and the headmistress at Hailsham want to be able to define your soul or see into your soul to the type of person that you are. And so there's a lot of pressure to get into the gallery. Tommy never gets in, and Kathy does, and this is kind of something that bothers Tommy for the entirety of the novel. You sort of start to see this relationship blossom between Kathy and Tommy, and there's just a tenderness there that is just beautiful, and you can see it developing into like a crush from both sides, and that, you know, it's a very deep friendship that maybe they will explore. After Ruth talks a bunch of crap about Tommy, and at this point, Kathy is basically one of those people that will do anything to make everybody else happy. She's a pushover, like, wholly, completely. And so anytime that Ruth gets upset about something, Kathy will do literally anything to make her feel better. And she'll agree with Ruth on pretty much everything if it means Ruth will not treat her badly. So Ruth picks on Tommy, and Kathy agrees with Ruth, and it turns into this big drama and everything. Eventually, Ruth actually starts dating Tommy and steals him away from Kathy. But Kathy can't seem to let Tommy or Ruth go, because she says that she loves them both, and so she ends up being an outsider to their relationship as it grows and blossoms. There's a ton of dynamics and a lot of little moments that happen in the book. I also feel like this is part of the book that I just didn't really like. I talk about this when I talk about my original review of this book. The writing is extremely cyclical. There is a lot of repeated moments. There's a lot of what I consider wasted moments in this book. We spend a ton of time at Hailsham in the book. Like, I would say half to 3/4 of the book is Hailsham and this weird triangle that Ruth, Kathy, and Tommy have created between each other. And the rest of the time of the book, which we'll get into, is like the last half to 3/4 is literally the other time in Kathy's life, her adulthood, basically. So we're seeing so much Hailsham on the page. I basically broke it down into like 10 minutes. I think it's during like 4th year they get this new guardian that's there, and she basically spills the beans on everything, right? She sits here and she's like, I feel like you guys need to know what's going on and what your purpose is. It all started out very benignly. A group of boys were sitting there chatting and saying how, you know, one day I want to be an actor, or one day I want to do this. And she just like completely interrupts this saga and says, there's no point in you dreaming about doing anything because your purpose has already been decided for you. And she says, your entire purpose is to go to school and to graduate and to donate your vital organs when you're old enough to do so. And then you die. She just comes right out and says it. And it's like, Miss Ma'am. But there's no follow-up. No follow-up. She just says that to a bunch of, like, I feel like they were like 12 or 13 year olds. And then she's like, okay, do with that what you will. We'll see you later. And yeah, it kind of just like wrecked their entire existence. As you would imagine, I suppose. And so pretty much after that whole thing happened, we jump to them leaving Hailsham when they're 18. When they're 18, they're allowed to leave, and this is what I would consider kind of like a gap year. Like, they don't really think they're old enough or mature enough to donate their organs yet. Like, they just don't. And they are required to be carers, which are the people that like take care of you and like keep you in good health in between your donations. That's what a carer does. You do have to become a carer at some point, but you're only required to do like 2 years or something like that, and then you can start your donations. And in between the time that they graduate from their school and become a carer, They give them time off to basically just have a life for a few years. Ruth, Tommy, and Kathy end up getting sent to a housing situation called the cottages, and it's literally like a bunch of rundown houses on a farm. When they get there, they meet kids from other schools. So this is the first time that we're hearing that there's actually more than one school. Like, Hailsham is not the only place that exists. So we're meeting these other young adult, 18 to 20, I guess you would say, because there's a range there. Kids that are, or young adults that are coming from other schools, and they exchange stories about the differences between Hailsham and these other schools, and basically Tommy and Ruth and Kathy figure out that these other schools are just boarding houses. Like, they don't really care about the kids that much. They don't teach them that much, whereas in like Hailsham, it's very elite. Like, they have uniforms, they're teaching them advanced mathematics, they're doing this art gallery thing, which is a big deal. Like, they're teaching them music and sports and all of these things, where it's like these other kids are not quite getting these experiences from their schools that they're getting at Hailsham. So people look at the kids from Hailsham differently. Like, they almost look at them like they're stuck up because they got this completely different and significantly better experience than a lot of these other kids did. While we're at the cottages, Kathy feels even more isolated from Tommy and Ruth because Tommy and Ruth start exploring their sexuality together, and a lot of the people at the cottages have coupled up, and Kathy is like the only one that is not part of a couple. Again, I feel like there's a lot of just moments and things that happen while we're at the cottages that to me felt kind of wasteful, but all of that stuff happens. At some point, this couple from the cottages, that's from another school, says, Ruth, we found your possible in town somewhere in Norfolk. At this point, the relationship between Kathy, Tommy, and Ruth is very strained because Ruth is awful. Again, like, the same things that she does at Hailsham, where she tries to be the best and she wants everyone to like her, and she will literally morph her personality to match the situation at hand, has happened in a more dramatic and noticeable fashion once they get to the cottages, because it's a very small group of people, and she is really envious of these people because they just seem so much more cultured or more enlightened in the real world than Ruth, Tommy, and Kathy are. And so she immediately starts trying to fit in with them, changing her behaviors to match that of the group. And Kathy calls her out on it, and Ruth basically just shuts her down and starts gossiping about her and being a total brat. So the relationship between Kathy, Ruth, and Tommy is very strained. And there's this big argument about going and seeing Ruth's possible in Norfolk. As a side note, they never come out and say the word clone anywhere in this book. Like, I am 100% possible that, like, it's not said in this book. Possible is said a couple of times, and model. So the person that they're modeled after is their possible. And that's what they mean. But the word clone does not happen in the book. So basically what's happened is this couple that lives at the cottages has, after they've like come and gone from a little day trip or whatever, says, Ruth, we think your possible is at Norfolk. We want you to come and see. Okay. There's a big argument there about whether Ruth really wants to go. She gets super agitated about it. And she doesn't really want Kathy and Tommy to come, or she only wants Tommy to come, but not Kathy. It is a really big deal, okay? Anyway, they all end up going. Everyone's in a terrible mood. No one really wants to be there. Ruth's being really, like, rude and mean. And they get there, and it turns up that the part of the reason that this couple from the cottages wants to go is because they want to interrogate Ruth, Tommy, and Kathy about Hailsham. they start asking them all these weird questions and about how kids from Hailsham are supposed to have like all of these extra privileges that these other kids from other schools are not supposed to have. Tommy and Kathy are just very blatant about like, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never heard about any of this. They start talking about a deferral, which means that like if you can prove that you're in love with somebody, then you can get deferred, and that so that you don't have to start your donations for another 5 years or something like that, because they got it in their head somewhere that kids from Hailsham were able to get a deferral, and they wanted to know, Ruth, Kathy, Tommy, tell me right now, how do we get a deferral? And of course, like Tommy and Kathy were like, look, never heard of anything like that. And then Ruth's like, well, I have. Of course, Ruth is going to come in there and be like, oh, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about because I know everything about Hailsham, and they don't know because they're not special like me. Not even kidding. This is when I had like had enough of Ruth. I had had enough of that girl. She was just driving me crazy, okay? Because of course I believe Kathy. She's the narrator, and she says she's never heard of anything like that, and she's not lied in the book yet, where we've caught Ruth in multiple lies just so that she can look like she knows stuff. It turns into this super awkward situation between Kathy, Ruth, and Tommy and this other couple, because obviously this couple is in love and they want to get their donations deferred. And so Ruth is obviously like, oh yeah, I'm gonna help you do whatever you need to do, and Kathy and Tommy are like, girl, what are you talking about? It turns into this whole thing. And it turns out that's the real reason why they wanted them to come to Norfolk with them, so that they can interrogate them about this deferral thing. So they take Ruth to this office building or whatever and say like, yeah, this is where we saw your possible. It's not her. Not her. And it's very obvious that it's not. And then Ruth goes on like a little mental breakdown, which like, okay. And she starts yelling at Tommy and Kathy about like, of course my possible's not going to be working in an office. Of course this, that, and the other, because obviously we're trash. The people that we were modeled after are garbage, like prostitutes, junkies, whatever. And she says, if you want to find like the people that we came from, look in the garbage, basically. And of course, like Tommy and Kathy are like really hurt by this. Ruth is trying to be very hurtful, and yeah, shortly after all of that happens, Kathy's like, I'm out of here, and she puts in to become a carer. Like, you can take all of the time that you're allowed until you have to become a carer. But Kathy's like, I'm just going to become a carer now because I don't want to sit here and watch Ruth and Tommy. I'm sick of Ruth, and I'm getting out of this situation. So she leaves the cottages and goes on to start being a carer. And this is when we move into the last section of the book, where we get back to Kathy being with Ruth, and Kathy, Ruth, and Tommy reconnecting. So turns out Kathy is like an extremely good carer, and so she's allowed to be a carer for like, I think it's almost like 12 years now at this point that she's been a carer, while almost everyone that she's gone to Hailsham with has like done their donations or completed. That's what they call it when you die. Completed. Also, I failed to mention this. This is set in the 80s, okay? It's not like some hyper futuristic thing. It's a dystopian period piece, is what it's described at. Like when they were at Hailsham and stuff when they were young was like the 60s, 70s, and then like when they're out as adults, it's in the 80s. So yeah, I feel like I totally should have mentioned that like way earlier. Sorry. Now that we've gotten all the backstory, we're back together with Ruth and Kathy as Ruth is going through another donation. And she's like, we've heard there's some things I want to do before I complete. And like, you know, most times you'll do a third, or if you can, a fourth donation before you complete. And so Kathy's just kind of like, Ruth, you're being like so dramatic because you're only on your second donation. And she's like, I don't want to donate anymore. I want to complete after my next donation. And there's kind of like this whole mindset about like your health and everything. Like doctors talk about this a lot when you get you're going into surgery, like, if you feel like you're not going to make it, it's basically like you're not going to pull through kind of thing. And so she's kind of got this in her head that she's not going to come out this other donation like she wants to complete, because she's heard a lot of these like horror stories about people that like have technically gotten through their fourth donation, but then they just hook them up to a machine and like let them live that way because there's always more stuff that you can donate. Of course, this is very, very on brand with Ruth, if you ask me, to just like kind of say stuff like this. And Kathy's just like, Kathy's been doing this for a long time, so she's like, I've literally never heard of that happening, but whatever, Ruth. At this point, Ruth is like, I want to go see this boat, which is like another one of these rumored things. And Kathy's like, yes, I've heard of the boat. I know where to go see it. And she said, okay. And Kathy's like, we should go by and get Tommy on our way there because it's on the way. And Ruth's like, oh, I haven't seen Tommy since the cottages. Yeah, they broke up after Ruth like stole him from Kathy. Whatever, I'm not bitter about it. And Kathy's like, yeah, I haven't seen him since I left too, obviously. So they go and they pick up Tommy, and there's just this instant connection between Kathy and Tommy. Like, they never missed a beat. They've missed each other so much. It's such a beautiful moment, and then Ruth just ruins it because she's Ruth. And they go to the boat, and Ruth is just being like Debbie Downer the whole time, talking about dying and about completing and about how the Guardians lied to them their whole childhood and this and that and the other. And yeah, and she starts ragging on Kathy again because she's like, this is all stuff that you're not going to understand because you've never donated anything. Kathy's like, it's not really my fault that I'm a good carer, and they haven't asked me to donate anything, but whatever. And then Ruth is like, I want you two to forgive me, and I'm really sorry because I purposefully took Tommy from you, Kathy, and you two missed out on your relationship because I was stubborn and didn't want you to have Tommy. OMG, excuse me? And she said that she purposely said a lot of things to her at the cottage so that she would never try to steal Tommy from her. And Kathy's like, of course I'm not going to forgive you. Good for you, Kathy. No, you should not forgive her. God. And Tommy is just like this sensitive, soft soul. And he's like, I just can't believe you would do that, Ruth. And so, Ruth says, I don't expect you to forgive me, even though I want you to. And she said, so I got something for you. She comes up with the head mistress's address and name. And she said, you have to go to the head mistress and ask for a deferral. And Kathy's like, girl, what are you talking about? We can't ask for a deferral. Tommy's already like started donating and I'm a carer. Like, it's way past the time for deferrals. Like, we can't do that. And she's like, you have to at least try. We also should note here that somewhere in between like the cottages and where they are now, Hailsham has closed. So the school is no longer in operation. They don't even know where the school is. Like, once they left the school, they never were able to figure out where it was. So a lot of the other schools stayed open, but Hailsham specifically had closed. They don't know why. They didn't say anything about it. They just said that it was no longer in operation. Kathy and Tommy are like, if we even go to the headmistress, what is it going to do? Like, Hailsham's not even open anymore. What kind of power does she have to give us a deferral? And Ruth's like, just promise me you'll try. Thank you for waiting forever to do that, Ruth. Like, thank you for opening the door just to have it shut just as quickly. Because Kathy and Tommy are absolutely right. What good is it going to do to go now? I don't know. Why didn't you let us have a little sliver of happiness when we were in our 20s before everybody started donating? Anyway, Ruth goes to her next donation and passes away, and so Ruth is now no longer in the picture. And so Kathy ends up becoming Tommy's carer. There's a huge conflict of interest here because Kathy and Tommy start sleeping together and starting a relationship. It's like uber creepy. She's his carer. And so then we get back into this whole thought process of the reason for the art gallery is so that they can see our souls, so that they know if we're telling the truth by saying that we're in love. It is this really far-fetched theme that I really had a hard time getting on board with. Tommy has it in his head that when they submitted work to the gallery, that Madame, that's what they called the headmistress lady, could see the art, she could see into her soul, and so she could know that we were telling the truth when we say that we love each other. Okay, well, Kathy, if you remember, Kathy had a lot of work submitted into the gallery. Madame had seen a lot of Kathy's work, so Tommy argued that Madame would know Kathy's heart. And Tommy argued that he had never gotten anything selected for the gallery because his art was a little bit non-traditional. And so he started making art again because he's got it in his heart that if he can make enough art to present to Madame, then she can judge his soul, and then she can tell that him and Kathy are telling the truth about being in love. So he makes a portfolio, they get in their car, and they go to the house. Okay, at this point in the book, I was excited because I was like, we're finally gonna get answers. They're gonna roll up on this woman, and they're gonna 1-2 punch, and we're gonna get some answers about what the hell is going on at Hailsham and what all this is really about and everything. Let me tell you, that did not happen. Okay, we go in, and she's kind of sitting there, and they're asking her, they're telling her why they're there. We want a deferral. Here's my art. Look at my art. Well, you know Kathy because you've seen all her art in the gallery. She's got loads of art that I know you've looked at. You know her soul. Here's my soul. We're telling the truth. We're in love. And in rolls one of the guardians from the school, and they're like, look, there's no deferrals. There never have been, and there never will be. The only purpose is for you is to donate your vital organs and die. That is the only purpose for you to be here. Then they started asking about Hailsham. What was the purpose of Hailsham? And these two ladies basically say that Hailsham was a social experiment, and that the reason Hailsham was there was to look at the more ethical side of organ donation, saying that, is it so bad to give these, and she called them like creatures, to give these creatures a normal life and small comforts and a little bit of normalcy, instead of just locking them up in these boarding houses and feeding them and keeping them healthy enough until they're old enough to donate. So Hailsham was this sort of social experiment to kind of like show people, like society, that we can still have organ donation, but it be a little bit more ethical and be wrapped in a prettier package, and that we don't have to be so cruel and unusual with the process. She goes on to explain that something political happened and Hailsham got blamed for it or something. A lot of their investors ended up withdrawing their money, and that's why Hailsham ended up closing. At this point, Tommy is like, what about the gallery? Like, Tommy is like one thought. What about the gallery? And this woman sits there and looks at him and said, we didn't use the gallery so that we could see your soul. We used the gallery to see if you had one. I almost passed away. What? And then that was it. Then they're like, you can leave now. Thanks, goodbye. Nice knowing you. That was it. And they just send them on their way. And of course, like, Tommy has a complete like mental breakdown, and then he tells Kathy, I don't want you to be my carer anymore, you can go. Kathy's like completely heartbroken, but she's like, I understand. What? As she leaves, and she hears through the grapevine that Tommy completes after, you know, the expected number of donations, and he's moved on. And at the end of the book, she's still going on as a carer, and she holds her memories of Hailsham close to her heart. I felt betrayed by the end of this book because, like, literally nothing was explained. Quite literally nothing. We're just thrown in the middle of this operation as it's already been existing for a long time. It's been existing to the point where they've got it down to raising children in schools. So it's had to have been around for a while, that it's established now. That doesn't seem like it's going to be letting up or anything. Hailsham was some social experiment that they shut down because it made people uncomfortable, basically, and that all these other schools were going to keep doing what they were doing and basically just harboring these children as they grew up to be carers, and they didn't really give a crap about their social or emotional benefits or anything like that. And so we didn't get any answers. That was my biggest beef with the book, was that, like, quite literally nothing was explained. So do not go into this book expecting it to be a science fiction-y type dystopian book. It's literally just a snapshot in time of these three people as they grow up, knowing what is to become of them, and how their love for each other ebb and flows. That's it. Which I found incredibly sad. Let's talk about the film now that I've rattled on about the book for eons. Okay, if you want a film that is identical to a book, this is the best adaptation I've ever seen. I'm not even kidding. I had to go back through the book, Spark Notes and everything, and try and pick apart the differences between the film and the book. And let me tell you, they were so minute that I almost don't even want to count these differences because they're so small. The casting for this film was spectacular. Like, two young girls that they cast for young Ruth and young Kathy, next to who they cast for adult Ruth and adult Kathy, you could not have asked for a better casting. And the acting for this book was just so beautifully done. The actress that played Ruth, I'm pretty sure it was Keira Knightley, just absolutely nailed it, okay? And then they had Andrew Garfield play Tommy. It was a beautiful performance. I cannot remember off the top of my head who played Kathy, but she was just perfection in this film. Like, even though we didn't get a lot of the smaller moments from the film, from the book in the film, the way that these actors and actresses were able to carry their characters made up for so much of that. I am almost on the point of saying that the film was better than the book, because the book just rattled on forever and was very cyclical. I didn't really like the writing style, as I've already stated, and so the film really took these moments and just expanded on them so beautifully. They picked the right moments to highlight, the right emotion and personality traits to highlight, that just really made the film sing. It was emotional. I felt more connected to how the storyline went in the film. Because, like I said, I think the intention of the book was to capitalize on the personalities of these three people and their journey through this time. And I felt like the book lacked in that because I wanted more information. They did give more information in the film. Like, immediately when the film opens, we get this line that explains the donor program, basically, and about how in the 60s they figured out how to fix lethal health issues, or fatal health issues, and then they introduced Hailsham and the donor program. And there were little moments throughout the film that just highlighted that this was a business, basically, that they treated them coldly, it was all a means to an end. Where in the book, I didn't feel that from the people that were in charge of Kathy, Tom, and Ruth. In the film, you really see it. Like, you really feel that it really was a business and that they really were only in it to get to the end goal. A few of the differences here, there were a lot of moments that were left out of the film, which, you know, is just how films obviously are. The guardian that's in the film that spills the details is actually fired from her job, where in the book she was not. She was just kind of reprimanded because she said she didn't lie to the kids. Like, she said the truth and everything. At the end of the film, Kathy says that she is going to become a donor, and in the book, Kathy never admits to becoming a donor or anything like that. She just, from what I could gather, she was going to stay on as a carer. Like, she was not supposed to be going into the donor program anytime soon, because she was really good at what she was doing. And in the film, she did say that she was going to be going into the donor program at the very tail end of the film. The word clones is used in the film, and I think they had to really lean into what was happening, because I feel like the nuance that's in the book would not have carried through the film. I feel like if people watched the film not knowing what the book or anything was about, that it would be so subtle that you almost wouldn't really perceptively understand what was happening, because it was, and that was something I struggled with the book, because like there was just so many questions I had while I was reading the book that I was like, are they not going to explain anything? Are they not going to tell us what's going on? No, they never did explain what was going on. In the film, I felt like it kind of forced their hand a little bit to explain it. Did they explain it outright? No. It was still very glazed over, very shiny. They never really got into the dirty details of it, but they did use words like clones a lot, program a lot. And you could just tell that this was like a butcher business, basically. Like, there were moments in the film, like as Ruth completes in the film, there was no reason for her to complete during her operation. Okay, I wouldn't say there's no reason, but like, she's on the table and her heart rate starts going, and there's no like rush to save her, resuscitate her. They literally just let her die. They continue during the surgery to remove her organ and let her complete. Like, there's no action taken to keep her alive, to resuscitate her. And as soon as they remove whatever organ they're getting, they immediately just like disconnected her and started like shutting down the surgical theater, and left her in there. Like, didn't remove any of the clamps on her body, didn't, you know, like sew her up. I mean, anyone that's watched a Grey's Anatomy episode knows that there's a procedure here that you're supposed to do, and they didn't do it because they didn't care. And that was it. Like, that's what I mean by there was this coldness in the film that they didn't translate into the book, that you see here, and you see that it's a business and an operation, and that they don't care about these people. That is what I mean. You see that in the film very blatantly, and I'm glad that they put it in there. Like, it really just brought it all into focus. But yeah, the film was identical to the book. Like, I've never watched a film adaptation that's this flippin' close, okay? It was really well done. I think that if you liked the book, you will love the film. I think if you didn't like the book, you could still really enjoy the film. I really enjoyed the film. I thought that the acting was done really well. I felt like I could see it all a lot better, that I could understand the purpose of the book because of how they did the film. Again, was everything explained? No. Was there any closure for Ruth, Tommy, Kathy? No, not really. One of the major differences in the film is that Kathy and Tom do stay together until Tommy completes. Like, this is a big theme in the movie, that Kathy stays by Tom's side until he completes. And there's just a lost love there at the end of the film with them. That's just heartbreaking. I hated Ruth in the film too, but I'm glad that they kept her like unlikable, because she really was. Like I said, if you want something that's just like so close to the book, like I had to dig for the differences. I had to dig for the differences. There's not as much emphasis on the gallery as there is in the book, or the sales that is in the book. But again, the book to me felt like it was about 100 pages too long. I didn't like the writing style, as I've said. It was really cyclical and it was really dense for no reason. I think the film took the most important parts of the book and really highlighted them and brought them to life. It focused on the socio-emotional connection of these characters and seeing them together. I think the acting was really well done. The casting was really well done. The writing was well done. This was a well put together film. And if you compare it to the book, they're identical. They did an extremely good job on this film. Okay, now that I've never talked this long on this channel. This was a really long one, but yeah, I really wanted to kind of get into it. I highly recommend this film. Even if you've not read the book, I think this film was really well done. And yeah, like I said, I wasn't a huge fan of the book. It kind of let me down in a lot of different ways. Film was really well done, and I think when you look at the film and the book together, like I said, they're mirror images. The differences between the film and the book are so small that I would almost not even consider them to be major. They're not. They're so minute that I'm just really impressed with how well they put the film together. Make sure you hit all the buttons down below so you know when I'm posting. I post every week, and I'm really glad that I was able to put the time in to do this post. Like I said last week, I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to put this together, but I'm really glad I ended up doing it. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!